Alright, this is a video whose purpose is to get your mindset out of thinking in structured C and going into Objective-C, specifically for the iPhone or similar, just an iOS device. iOS is the iPhone and iPad operating system. So hopefully you're already familiar with C. And I have a couple examples up here, which I'll get to this little notepad thing in a second. Alright, so what we're going to be transitioning from into, and the reason there's an intro video, is because we have to go into thinking in objects. And contrary to a C program, which literally just goes from the top down, the iPhone program is kind of like it just floats in a pool, and stuff inside of it also floats, and it goes away when it's not wanted anymore. So we could say we have these system things off to the side. We'll call this one user preferences, and that is orange. Should not be orange, just so it's easier to see. Okay, so make this a little easier. And this would be a little system object that sits in the background. We'll come up with names for the others later. But this is the main application right here. Let's see. So this, that's a text, that's why. So this application would be your application. And it has stuff inside of it, which you can actually draw curves like this inside of the iPhone. I'll probably get to similar things later. So on that note, this is actually an object which floats inside of your application, which the little window here is also an object. And instead of thinking of it like a loop that continuously asks for input and displays something on the screen, you're going to think of it as I'm inside of a window waiting for things to happen, and then I'm going to respond to those things. It's more closer to real life, and you have to think about real life ways of handling things just to come up with patterns that make sense. And you'll see what I mean when we get into structure and design. So this thing off to the right is another window, does something else. Let's say it displays a square on the screen in pink with a white fill. Okay. That's also something you can do in Quartz, which is the graphics system inside of iOS. Don't worry about that right now, though. I'm just saying that this is an object inside of another object, which we call a view. And views contain anything from text to checkboxes to pictures. You put these things together, which is how you make games and applications. So this is an object, this is an object. Above everything is a system object. And you could say that's the window. It's literally above absolutely everything. So this line is kind of anchored from, you could say, this invisible system. Your iPhone also connects into the system, so you don't have to worry about how to draw the colors. You just say which color you want, and you send it to the function that handles the graphics. You can kind of take that for granted. It's part of the runtime system you're not allowed to access anyway, so you can still draw anything you want into it, and there's a system for how that works. So user preferences is an actual object that exists inside the system, but you can create your own. So we will have, say you're writing a game and you need something that handles the background, either the inventory or the inventory the player's carrying, or just anything. This is, if you want to look it up, you'll get into classes and you'll eventually learn what a persistent single class would be, and essentially that's just an object that sticks around. What's a more practical use for these things? So there's user preferences, and then there's can't think of any right now, actually. There's plenty of objects inside of Objective-C. that make it so that creating these background objects makes them a lot easier to use. And perhaps when we get into them, it'll be easier to use. But the point is, think of them as objects just like anything else, but instead of being directly related to views, you could say they're rocks lying on the side that you pick up when you need. Kind of like, say you write a secret message on the rock, and every now and then you need it, so you pick it up and look at the back and transfer that message to the view. Anyway, it's really important to get out of this mindset of this, which hopefully you know what this does. Include standard input output. It gives you printf and scanf. This is a function declaration or prototype. Structure named person. Hopefully you know how to use typedef with this. I've just kept it simple. If this was a game, you'd have health, position in the X and Y, and give them a map to move inside. So you create the structure, person, player. Hopefully you know how to do this. Give them a map. Can be any size. I'm being short here, but you can use 2 for loops to initialize a map if you don't know how to do that. We'll actually get into that later, just using graphics, but I believe many game programming books teach how to do that. Player health, so I initialize the player. I even have comments on what I'm doing. The main game loop, if you've programmed in C, you know that a game is essentially something that repeats until either the win or the loss. So do, get input, show map. You might want to do this in the other order. It doesn't matter too much because with the iPhone you're going to be using visuals a lot more than console. In fact, you won't really have access to the console at all other than debugging. So at the very end, when player health is less than or equal to 0, you print the player wins because, well, there was no other way to get out. Return 0 just gets out of the main loop. So essentially you're used to games that go straight down. Maybe they'll create something at the top, import some header files, or include. You're going to start using import. You get into the loop. If you're really into C, you've already learned how to lock a video buffer, put something into it, and then display it on screen, and then you're already familiar with separating your logic from your visual, which is very good. Objective-C makes that relatively automatic. There's no way around it. The closest thing you get is shoving it into an object called a controller, which is just the logic behind something that goes on screen. And if you just forward the messages to another object, suddenly you have logic separated. So if you wrote really good clean C, you can actually translate that directly over to Objective-C, and the only thing you have to change is how things appear on screen. But you have to get into that mindset. So if you're watching this video, chances are you want to start out with iPhone, Objective-C, and you're wondering why I am boring you with all these pictures and words inside of Windows, not even using a Mac. Well, the second video will be in Mac, and it'll show you code. But I can't stress how important it is to remember that everything is an object and it has a life cycle. The life cycle means it's created, it dabbles around. By dabbles around, I mean it just sits there and waits for input. Otherwise, you programmatically tell it when to exit, and you're pretty much waiting for events the whole time. Don't think of it as a structured top-down program. Think of it more as a pool, and you'll be swimming in it. If you forget that, it's going to be really hard to understand what's going on just in the first method that we're going to use, which is the method that it's called viewDidLoad, when your iPhone's view, rather this thing that shows up to the user, first loads. But that is what we will be dealing with next. You can stop the video now. I just forgot which screen I can shut it off in. What? I wasn't even recording. Yes, I was. Wrong window.